TCU football's just hiring everybody these days, it seems like. Plus, they signed one player on National Signing Day. We've got basketball news for the men and the women, and it's about that time to start talking a little Frog Ball USA. All that and more on this episode of Frogs Insider. Hey, Frog fans, welcome back into another episode of Frogs Insider presented by the Flying T Club. Jamie Plunkett here alongside Melissa Treebusser. Melissa, we got a jam-packed show this evening.
We do indeed, and looks like news is breaking around us left and right as we're sitting down to record. But we're not a live show, so we don't have to break news.
We don't have to break news, but we can talk about news.
Yeah, we
and
can.
That news is that Shams, I can't even say his name. What's his name? Please hold.
Okay.
This is great radio right out of the gate. Shan Sheriff over 105.3 The Fan is tweeting that he is hearing that SMU Athletic Director Rick Hart is out tomorrow, which would be Friday, which would be the day that you are probably listening to this episode of the podcast. So as we dig around and try to figure out more about what's going on there, we'll talk about it if it's coming up on the show. But
if there's one thing that we know, it's that TCU fans will handle any impending doom across the Metroplex with utmost maturity and grace. So...
yes, of course. I'm sure there's no Craig James killed 5 hookers mentions on Twitter right now.
Maybe Jeff Hooker immediately responded to the...
Jeff who?
I just went Jeff Hooker. That was great. Jeff Mitchell. I went like early 2000s safety for the Colts, I think, right? It's nice. Been a week. It is this week. This week has been a month. This month has been a year. We're great. We're doing so well.
We're doing great. Hey, you know who is doing great? That's the Flying T Club, TCU's
Indeed.
NIL Collective. Let's get back on track here, Melissa, and talk about our good partners over at the FTC. Flying T Club is TCU's only NIL collective. They support over 130 TCU student athletes. They are a 501c3 nonprofit, and they partner with organizations in and around the city of Fort Worth, get these student athletes involved in good work in the communities of Fort Worth. Really cool organization, and they would love your support. All you have to do is go over to flyingtclub.com, and you can see the bevy of options that you have for getting involved, whether that's a one-time personal donation, a recurring donation, a large gift, or even a corporate partnership. If you have a business that you think would be a good fit alongside the Flying T, you can have that conversation with them. And I'll say this too, because we are in an ever-changing and shifting landscape of college athletics. You may be thinking to yourself, well, Jamie, Melissa, we don't need to worry about the Flying T Club after this year because rev sharing is coming. And I would encourage you to stop thinking that way, because rev sharing will be the bulk of what happens as far as paying student athletes goes from here on out, but NIL will still be a thing. And there are schools across the country right now, the Ohio States, the Texases, the Alabamas of the world, who are trying to find ways to play above the rev share salary cap, and that's going to happen through NIL. So check out Flying T Club today if you want TCU to stay competitive in athletics as far as the eye can see for as long as the future may hold. FlyingTClub.com is the place to go to check out what they're doing in the NIL space for TCU.
Well done. We should also take a moment to thank our friends at Dave Campbell's Texas Football, and we are, as always, honored to be a part of the Republic of Football Podcast Network, where you can catch this show along with every other Division I football program in the state of Texas being represented. You can subscribe directly to the Frogs Insider podcast feed and YouTube channel, as well as our social media channels, or you can subscribe to the Republic of Football entire podcast network and hear about all of the dirty dealings going on across the Metroplex at SMU. That's what we're just going to assume that's what's happening, completely without foundation. You could also check in on Baylor football, one of the probably preseason dark horses, Texas Tech football, and all the money Cody Campbell is spending. And every other Division I program. That also includes schools like UTSA and UNT. So for your full college football fix in the state of Texas, Republic of Football Network, if you just want to hear the delightful voices of myself and Jamie Plunkett, Frogs Insider has a standalone feed as well.
Yes, we do. We also have a YouTube channel where you can go see a bunch of video content, these podcasts, and a lot more For instance, there are 2 videos up as of Thursday afternoon. There was a little bit of media availability out at baseball. We talked to Kirk Sarlos. We talked to a couple players. Those videos and interviews are up there. We have post-game videos from every game we're at, and a lot of other stuff.
Games.
Just so much video content. Your eyes will love it, and your ears will love it as well, because we actually have pretty good audio going over there right now.
And you're not going to see more baseball content anywhere than you will at the Frogs Insider YouTube channel. So that every post game, and Jamie, as we said, you do an exceptional job.
Thank you.
Covering TCU baseball, and I'm very excited to be back in Fort Worth to cover TCU baseball this spring as well.
I've been using some of those photos you already took for my season previews over at hornfrogblitz.com.
Previews have been awesome. I've definitely read them, checked them out. So many new faces, and so many positions up for grabs on the infield, the outfield. And I think you've done an excellent job breaking that down, as well as the pitching and who we might see opening weekend, which is a week from the time when most people will be listening to this podcast.
Yes, February 14th. It's not only for Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day for lovers, baseball for lovers. Coincidence? I think not.
I think not.
We're going to get into baseball in a little bit on the show, but first, Melissa, let's talk gridiron. Let's talk football. This past Wednesday, was the old National Signing Day, still technically National Signing Day, although it has lost quite a bit of luster in the early signing period era. TCU signed 1 player, defensive lineman Blake Robinette out of All Saints here in Fort Worth. He is a guy that has been committed to TCU since July. Didn't sign in the early signing period, but ended up signing this Wednesday. He completes TCU's class at 30. 30 players.
Giant number.
31,
actually.
Actually.
Yeah, giant man as well, signing
He's
with
a
TCU.
big kid. He had a couple different offers, I believe. He had offers from 11 different schools, including TCU. He had a North Texas offer, an Oregon State offer, a Washington State offer, UTEP, and Missouri State, a couple other schools as well. Becomes the 31st member of TCU's incoming class. The other 30 of whom, Melissa, are all already on campus and working out.
Crazy.
And I think we're going to see so much more of that moving forward when you think about how springs may restructure here, how the whole offseason may restructure now that players are allowed to work out into May and June. I think we might start to see more of, as front offices or as football staffs at the college level start to take on more of a front office appearance with GMs and all these other directors of player personnel and all this other stuff. I think we might start to see the college football season and schedule start to take on more of an NFL-like appearance as well, with rookie OTAs for all these incoming freshmen that come in January, some OTAs later in the spring, and then hitting the ground running in fall with a fall camp. Let's do this. Okay. So I just mentioned I had a segue, and then I just kept talking past the point of the segue, which is so disappointing. Front offices are starting to look more and more like NFL front offices, and TCU has done quite a bit of hiring.
Has all of them. They have all of the front office.
And so, we've seen things like Ron Riviera sign with Cal as their new GM this week. We've seen a lot of GMs across the college landscape. TCU is taking a slightly different approach to their quote-unquote front office, their front of house staff, their scouting staff. They aren't having a single general manager per se, but they have a couple people split out into roles that would have otherwise been assigned to a general manager. So they're kind of splitting it up and giving it to multiple people. One of those people is Tyler Olker, who is the director of player personnel. He's been with Sonny Dykes for a really long time. He's awesome. I had him on an old show that I was doing with the last group we were at. If people want to go dig that out and watch that. Really smart guy, really incredible talent identifier. Has done a great job helping Sonny put together some of these really good recruiting classes over the last couple of years. But now, because of the way that scouting works and the amount of people in the transfer portal and the amount of freshmen that you're looking at, TCU has actually opened up 4 new positions that are assistant director of player personnel roles, and those 4 roles have been filled. One already was by Raj Murthy, who's been here for about a year and a half now. He came over from Houston. Really awesome. Cool cat.
Yeah.
A really cool dude. Has done a lot of great stuff for TCU. They filled those other 3 roles this week, and they announced it on social media on Wednesday or Thursday of this week. a name that everybody knows is coming back and working for TCU again. That is the great Aaron Green. As soon as I heard he was coming back, Melissa, I pulled out my phone. I pulled up the tip
picture.
pass.
Yep.
No, I didn't tweet it. I just showed it to my wife, Texas Tech grad, and said, this guy that caught this pass, he's coming back. He's working for TCU again.
How's the couch been feeling this week, Jamie, after that? Like, how's the back? Is it okay?
Men's basketball lost to Tech, so it's all even at this point, really.
That's good.
Anyways, so Aaron Green is coming back. He's going to be on staff at TCU, which is really, really cool. He's going to have a role in player personnel development and scouting. Another guy, Chris Owens, who played at Alabama, spent a little bit of time in the league, I believe, as well, is going to come back and work for TCU as well. And a guy who was here in 2022, who was a part of TCU's staff in that miracle season, that championship run. Brett Kumnock is coming back as well. He spent the last few years on staff at Colorado State.
You blew past that name, Jamie. You blew past it.
I'm a mature adult.
Makes one of us.
There we go. Brett Kumnock's coming back. Chris Owens is here. Aaron Green is coming back. And they are filling out that kind of player personnel office that is going to be such a key part of the operation for Sonny Dykes as far as identifying talent and getting talent on campus. So really excited for those guys and happy to see them hit the ground and get into work.
Well, I think it's the cheat code in college athletics, right? Like, especially if you're looking at what could essentially be a salary cap era, the best thing you can do and the place where you can really just stash talent is in the front office now and on their coaching staffs. And they all obviously have different roles and responsibilities and what they're allowed to do. But it's apparent that Jeremiah Donati and now Mike Buddy have told Sonny Dykes, do what you need to do to put together the type of staff that can help us win football games. And like you said, he has made a bunch of hires. They've been strategic hires. They've been exciting hires. It's a lot of young guys. It's very clear what he is addressing and what his strategy is in that regard. And a ton of talent too. Just so much talent. Just young, hungry folks that are trying to rise up the ranks in football. And if there's one thing that we know, it's that Sonny Dykes can develop a coaching tree, that he hires assistants really well, and he hires people that other people want to have on their staff. So I think these look from the outside like they're going to be exceptional hires. We'll see once we get to spring ball, but there's a lot of reason to be excited as a fan and to see TCU continuing to make an investment in the margins and find creative ways to continue to improve that program outside of just spending money recruiting. This coaching budget does not impact TCU's player budget whatsoever. These are separate pots, and I think it's a really bold strategy, and it's kind of started at Alabama when that program was humming under Nick Saban. So if that's the model that you're trying to replicate, I think that's a pretty good place to start.
I agree. And you can get to a point where you think, oh, maybe there are too many cooks in the kitchen. But I think based on the kind of organizational structure that Sonny has laid out for this front office staff, it all makes a ton of sense. It's just like you're expanding departments individually and getting more eyes on projects to make sure you're as thorough as possible. So really do like the hires. I like that, two of the hires are former college players. Who understand not only the front office aspect of this, but what it actually takes to be a student athlete at TCU, and then also in one of the kind of idyllic programs, Alabama. So I think that's really great. And that's not where TCU stopped with their hires this week either, Melissa. One of the things that we've been talking about for the last couple of years since the national championship game has been offensive line play and some of the inconsistencies there, some of the challenges we've seen TCU face in that regard. Running game has struggled because of it. Josh Hoover's been hit a couple times because of it. And TCU went out and hired not one, but two assistant coaches for the offensive line to support A.J. Ricker in the work that he's doing as the offensive line coach. One of those is Randy Clements, who most recently this past year was the offensive line coach at North Carolina, TCU's first opponent this upcoming fall. A really veteran offensive line coach, a lot of seasons under his belt, a lot of knowledge under his belt, similar system to what Kendall Briles and A.J. Ricker like to do. So that's a really, really I think, a strong value add. To get him to come on not as the offensive line coach, I think is really impressive. He's had some health issues, I think, in recent history, which have maybe deterred him from taking another O-line coach job and kind of be in this more assistant role. Might give him some more flexibility. But anyways, an incredible offensive line mind coming to Fort Worth in the form of Randy Clements.
Yeah, it's almost like Jerry Kill-esque coming
Yeah,
back, right?
it really
like
it does,
very
and like a
similar-
smaller scale, it
Yeah.
does feel like that for sure. And then also Robert Luce, who was, I believe, he played at Missouri as an offensive lineman, and then most recently he was an offensive analyst at Texas A&M. And I did not look this up. I should have. I'm curious to know
if he was there.
Luce was an offensive lineman at Missouri when A.J. Ricker was on the staff at Missouri. That would make a ton of sense.
Yeah,
Are you
so
Googling it right now?
I'm Googling it right now. He 2012 to 2014 was when he was a Missouri Tiger.
A.J. Ricker.
Let's see if I can find Ricker was at.
He was at Missouri in 2014 and 15.
Okay, yeah, so they did definitely
They
overlap
overlapped for a
so,
season there. Cool.
Yeah, Luce looked like redshirted in that first year and then would have played for Ricker in year 2. And I think he was an all-conference player. I think I saw in his bio.
Yeah,
at
talented
Mizzou.
guy.
So, yeah, and again, like you've got comfort, familiarity, and trust among these guys. But again, you're looking at an area where you want to see significant improvement, where you want the play to be better, and you're giving more tools to the guy tasked with making that happen.
Yes.
And guys, again, super well respected, are going to be an absolute value add on the recruiting trail. Probably not guys that are going to be around for 4 or 5 years, but certainly willing to invest in TCU right now. And I think there's not anything negative outside of, like you said, the potential of too many cooks in the kitchen. But I if there's something I trust, it's Sonny Dykes getting his coaching staff bought in and on board in a way that can be really effective for the players.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I don't think there's any question walking into that office space who's in charge, who makes the final call at the end of the day. That's Sonny Dykes. And I think one thing that we've learned about him in his now 3+ years at TCU is that he really does value input from a variety of sources. We saw it this past year when he brought in Dana Holgerson and Todd Graham. We've seen it in the past years as well, bringing on different assistants. And the addition of offensive line assistants as well is kind of in line with a couple other position groups that we've seen in the past years, especially in the secondary, right? Last year, you had Julius Lewis working with the corners under a cornerbacks coach. You had Juice Brown working with the safeties under a safeties coach, right? And so there's been this kind of addition to the coaching staff as well as the front office staff under Sonny Dykes, and a lot of that is because the NCAA has loosened the rules on who can hire and who you can hire and who can coach and be hands-on and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's a really good. I think it's a really good opportunity for TCU to get some smart guys on staff, both in the front office and on the coaching staff. So applause all around for these spring hires. Spring football is coming up pretty soon as well, Melissa, for TCU. I think the spring season kicks off
late March, I believe.
I'm vamping late March into...
I want to say like 26, like March, something like that. I think I saw.
Into April. I'm scrolling. March
Are we going to have a
26th.
spring game, or are we going to shut it down?
That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, we've seen all across the country teams moving away from spring games for a variety of reasons, right? You can say we don't want to give people the opportunity to scout for the portal. We don't want to put that on film. We don't want guys to get hurt, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. I think that's part of what I was talking about earlier, the shift away from a traditional college football schedule into a more NFL-esque OTAs, spring workouts, get the quote-unquote rookies or new faces in early, get them acclimated, and then really spend the summer locking in and getting your work in. And the spring game doesn't really fit into that model as easily as it did into the old model. I know, like for TCU, whether or not they go with the spring game, I mean, it's not like it would be the first time in history that TCU didn't have one. And also, it's not like TCU has ever really made a big deal out of the spring games that they had. right?
Also
Like
true.
Nebraska canceling their spring game feels like a bigger deal because I
Yeah.
believe they like sold tickets. You know, they treated
It
it
was a
almost like it
huge
was a
deal.
football game, right? And
Yeah.
they would sell out their
It's sell out.
100,000 person stadium.
Yeah.
Not the case at TCU, right?
Yeah.
So a little bit of apples and oranges there.
And we will have some open practices. There'll be some opportunity. We'll get to do some reporting. So it's not like it'll be flying blind. This won't be the Gary Patterson Fort Knox days by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, I think the spring game is not like, I would almost rather see, if they don't want to do that, it might be fun if they moved to kind of the Pro Bowl style and had some skills competitions and different things
kind of
like that.
Schulmeyer Live has been doing with basketball the last few years.
Get people excited, bring them out, let them be a part of something, make it free. That's, if there's one thing we've heard that Buddy has most been tasked to do by fans is improve the overall experience. That'd be a great way to kind of get some fan buy-in. Like, it could be that could be a fun little thing to do. I don't
Doing
know.
the Pro Bowl receiving challenge is the one that stood out to me. Hey, Eric McAllister and Jordan Dwyer, here are these gigantic Mickey Mouse hands. Now go catch this football coming at you 100 miles an hour out of a jugs machine. Good luck.
I'm here for it. I think it would be an absolute blast. Maybe a little flag football game at the end. Maybe media versus coaches. I'm here for it. I'm in. You can take this idea, Sonny Dykes. We will give it to you free of charge. You do have to credit us and invite us to it. Other than that, you can have it.
Absolutely. We'll just MC it.
Yeah.
How much would people
gosh.
hate that if we MC'd a skills challenge?
Microphones and the big on it. Listen, it can't be worse than some of the other microphones in that stadium on game day. Just say that.
Shout out to the student section. All right, let's move on. Women's basketball had a really challenging week this week on the road 2 times in Big 12 play. They go on the road to Ames this past Sunday, and they knock off Iowa State. They get the win there, which was a really good win, even though Iowa State maybe isn't having the season the Cyclones hoped they would be having. And then on Wednesday night this week, TCU travels to Manhattan for the matchup that has been brewing for the past couple of months, as these two teams, TCU and Kansas State, have been ranked in the top 15. People have been debating who's the better team. Obviously, Kansas State was out without their leading scorer, and has been for the past couple of weeks, but the Wildcats knock off TCU 59-50. They looked really good, Melissa, in this game. And, they threw a lot of really smart defensive schemes at this Mark Campbell offense that forced, 17 turnovers?
Yeah, there was their
37% shooting from the floor.
Yeah, I think 5
consecutive
turnovers, and something like 8 in the first quarter, 10 or 11 in the first half. Look, if we've seen an Achilles heel for TCU, there's just not a lot of physicality in the backcourt.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to double team a ball handler, especially a player like Haley Van Lith that is very ball dominant and has a high usage rate in that regard, and she's 5'9", maybe.
Haley is 5'9", yeah.
Yeah, for being generous, listed at 5'9". And you double her, you have Serena Sundell, who was unquestionably the best player on the floor.
She looked great.
She
great. Scored 29?
Yeah, but it wasn't even just her scoring. Like she defensively.
Well, she leads the Big 12 in assists per game too.
Yeah.
Like she's been dominant.
And with Lee out, she's stepped up her scoring and is looking to be more aggressive in that regard. But she's also an exceptional defensive player, partially due to the fact that she's 6'2". And so they were blitzing Haley when she had the ball in her hands. They were sending Sundell at her. They were doubling her with big guards. Haley likes to use that kind of little back dribble to get out of it, but they were forcing her to the sideline and picking her up right across half court. So there was nowhere for her to create space. The offense was way too slow to adjust in the first quarter. They were lucky that Kansas State also struggled massively on offense in the first half as well, or this could have been a much different game. But it was disappointing to see the team adjust as slowly as they did. It was heartening to see them stick around, keep it close with defense, and continue to play hard even when it looked like things were going to kind of roll out of control, especially in an environment. It was almost 7,500 fans. It was a sellout. They were loud. Sedona Prince, who we'll touch on here in a bit, like this is the first time she's been booed every time she touched the ball. And I'm sure, and she missed, I think, her first 3 free throws. I'm sure it got in her head a bit. But the way to beat this TCU team is to have big physical athletic guards, which not every team has. Like Kansas State, South Carolina have some unicorns for sure. Iowa State had some success doing the same thing, but in the post, where you again don't have a ton of physicality, but Deasia Merrill stepped up.
Shout out to Deasia Merrill. Yeah, she was phenomenal in that Iowa State game.
Yeah, and Bigby kind of has those tools, but got in foul trouble early and won on a couple questionable calls. So they had the formula. They executed. Jeff Mittie outcoached Mark Campbell on his home court. I think what I'd like to see in the remaining, I think 6 or 7 games here that this team has is there's a lot of roll out the ball and let them play, and they've earned that right because they're so experienced. But you're scouted really well at this point in the season.
Yeah.
And this is where I'd like to see a few more sets. The press break was a disaster, and that shocked me. They weren't ready for it, and they weren't ready to adjust to it. You can't run when pick and roll is the primary option for your offense, and your ball handlers are getting blitzed like that. Like, that's a really hard play to execute if you can't get the ball out quick, and didn't get the ball out quick. So Kansas State won. This was not TCU beating itself. They forced TCU to play poorly. But I think, I think hopefully at this point, Campbell has enough film of where his team struggles that he can adjust and adapt by the time we get to the Big 12 tournament and into March.
Yeah, and I think the thing that impressed me most about Kansas State defensively on Wednesday night was when they were blitzing the ball handler, they did such an excellent job of cutting off the middle of the court.
Yes.
Right? Like, sometimes you see one player on the blitz get a little lazy, and maybe the player can dribble out of it, or they force the player back towards the middle of the court rather than the sideline. But Kansas State consistently cut off the middle of the court, which cuts off your sight lines, cuts off your ability to pass. And we saw TCU, especially in that first quarter and at the end of the game in the fourth quarter, just make really bad decisions with picking up dribbles, trying to make a pass out of trouble. Really kind of collapsed in the moment, frankly, against those double teams and those blitzes. So really good job defensively by Kansas State. I will say, even with as poorly as how TCU played and how well Kansas State was doing defensively, TCU had every opportunity to win this basketball game, right? Madison Connor hits a 3 with about 6 minutes left in the game to put TCU up 44-43. And you're thinking, okay, the offense looked really good in the third quarter. They've started to figure it out a little bit. They started to space. They weren't running as many pick and rolls. They were running pick and rolls with Connor and letting her get open for some threes, which is how she hit that go-ahead 3 when the defender peeled off. And, then all of a sudden Kansas State's like, no, we're good. And
Serena Sundell was like, whoa, we're good.
Kansas State closed the game from that point on a 16-4 run.
Yeah. 7-0 over the 7-0 over the final 3.5 minutes, I think.
Defensively, they didn't get stops when they needed to get stops. They let Sundell get into the paint a little too easily. Maybe some of that was because Sedona was in some foul trouble. Maybe some of that was because Agnes was in some foul trouble, didn't want to get that 5th one. But at the same time, like, you've got to when it's time to get stops, you can't be thinking about getting a foul, right? You've got to go in and make stops. I'm curious too. And this isn't necessarily an officiating complaint, but I've picked up on it a couple times throughout this season. It seems like, and this is maybe particularly true in the women's game, teams that are physical always tend to get the benefit of the doubt more so than teams that are trying to match physicality with a physical team. And I've watched a lot of Notre Dame and UConn this year, and what I've noticed about those two teams, because those are two more finesse teams as well, similar to TCU, maybe a little bit more natural physicality, but they are more on the skill-based offensive timing, let's get on a roll here kind of teams. And the games where they've struggled, like UConn struggling against Tennessee this evening, was when they had to match physicality and a couple players get in foul trouble, and then you're all out of sync.
Yeah.
You're all out of rhythm. And so that's not a complaint that the officials were bad against in the TCU Kansas State game, although there were questionable calls for both teams. But that is just an observation that I've had this season.
I think it's a really fair observation. And I agree, like officiating in women's basketball is bad for the most part. And TCU has been the benefit of some bad officiating, and they've been on the wrong side. I didn't think, the game at Kansas State was particularly poorly officiated, but I think my biggest frustration this season is Haley Van Lith has to get the lowest percentage of superstar calls of any guard in college women's basketball. And it's this, I think maybe this is like my Sacramento Kings fandom sneaking in of like, when you don't play for a team that everybody knows as an elite team, even if you're an elite player, it's hard for you to earn that star whistle. And I feel like I spent so much time on the baseline at women's basketball games taking photos. I see that contact happen.
Right.
And I see her frustration. I've heard her frustration a couple of times. And she has a right to be frustrated. I don't expect a whistle every time she goes to the basketball or goes to the hoop, but she certainly gets fouled pretty much every time she goes to the hoop. And there's definitely contact. So you'd like to see her she's not getting to the free throw line, but she's still taking the ball hard to the cup. And that is super frustrating. So, I think at the end of the day, the important thing to remember is TCU has 2 losses in conference. Both are on the road. Both were in incredible road environments to ranked opponents, right? And they're probably going to flip-flop with Kansas State. They're still going to be in the top 16. The goal is to be in the top 16 of the net so that you get the opportunity to be a host team in those first 2 rounds. They do have an advantage as I think they are the clear second best team in the league. And I spent a lot of time as I was trying to figure out my travel to go to Kansas City for the Big 12 tournament of figure out when they would play.
Yeah.
And I looked at the teams right behind them. It's Baylor, it's Oklahoma State, and it's West Virginia. They get West Virginia at home with no return trip. They have to go to Baylor, but Baylor still has to play, I think, Kansas State and West Virginia. And Oklahoma State. So like their schedule lines up the most favorably of any of the teams kind of in that top grouping. I would be shocked if they were anything lower than 3 in the final standings, and I still expect them to be the second best team. Kansas State at this point, I feel confident is going to win the regular season. And it's going to be matchup dependent for what happens in the tournament. So Kansas State could slip up. But I'm really.
And they did drop one to Colorado.
They did drop one to Colorado, but at Colorado in altitude.
Sure.
That's a tough one. They're not above reproach. Like they could certainly lose a game. Sundell was, lights out against the Frogs, and could, there was nobody else really. So they do have some weaknesses without Aoka Lee, but. TCU still has a lot to play for, and I think is still in the driver's seat to finish in the top 2 in that conference, and that's all that matters at this point. You're playing for March Madness. You're hoping to stumble into a Big 12 title along the way.
One last thing on officiating that has nothing to do with TCU women's basketball. I saw a tweet earlier this week about my precious adult son Luca, who is now a Los Angeles Laker, that said. Luka is not going to have to argue or whine with officials as much anymore because he is now a Los Angeles Laker and he's going to get those calls.
Yes, this is very true. And I will be glad to root for Luka if he stops crying, because that was my biggest complaint about him as not a Mavs fan.
And LeBron is going to get credit for growing Luka up in that regard.
Oh, 100%. 100%. This has all been orchestrated. I do want to say on the Luka front that my students are so upset. I've made it a poll question that I do a question of the day every day in my classroom. I made it a poll question. It went about as well as you'd expect. And then they've asked to make it a mod in our yearbook. So this will forever be memorialized in our school yearbook for all time. And I normally would be like, no, not like current event related, but this was too important to not address.
Shout out to my beautiful wife who, for about 25 minutes this evening after the children were in bed, just let me vent. I think it's like the 4th or 5th time this week that she has just sat there and let me call Nico Harrison every name under the sun.
Only 4 or 5. That's good. That's growth.
Nico Harrison, who now has private armed security following him around everywhere. Not a joke.
I believe it.
Not a joke.
This is Dallas has not been this betrayed.
We
in
are
quite a
not
while.
well. Mavericks
No.
fans are not well.
No.
Even though I believe they beat the Celtics tonight, they are not doing well right
That
now.
is, yeah.
Anyways, this is not a Dallas Mavericks podcast.
Thank God.
This is a TCU podcast. I do want to say before we pivot to men's basketball stuff, there was a report that came out today in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram written by Stephen Johnson about Sedona Prince and an altercation with an ex-girlfriend. I have not had an opportunity to read that article yet. Melissa,
did.
I think you have. I'm not ready to talk about anything like that, having not read the article, having not talked to people, having not figured that out yet. So we're going to hold off on talking about that situation until the next episode of the pod. Hopefully more information will come out, more clarity about the situation, so that when we talk about it, we are as informed as we can possibly be.
The article was updated after its initial publishing with remarks from Sedona Prince's lawyer. I have not had a chance to read those. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, I will say I think everyone should read it. I think Stephen did an excellent job in his initial reporting, as he always does. And, yeah, we will. We don't want to put our heads in the sand here, but we also want to be informed before we open up that discussion. So
Absolutely. Now let's pivot uncomfortably and awkwardly to men's basketball, who all of a sudden have won their last two games.
Yeah.
They beat Colorado, who we're going to talk about Tad here in a second.
Oh, good.
Because he was freaking hilarious in the
Yeah,
postgame.
he was great.
After that game. And then they go and they beat West Virginia
Yeah.
on Wednesday night in a game where they led by double digits for a good portion of it, surprisingly.
Yeah.
And held on late, hit free throws late.
Yeah.
Made 20 of 23 free throws, won the rebounding battle, 40 combined points and only 4 turnovers from your guards. What is going on?
What
The
a
world
way,
has turned upside down.
What a way for Jamie to get win 500, right?
Win number 500 for Jamie Dixon on Wednesday night on the 1-year anniversary of his father's passing. He was reasonably and expectedly a little bit emotional in the post-game press conference afterwards. When he was asked about 500 wins, he said that wasn't the thing that was front of mind for him, and obviously so. But I think it was good for TCU fans to have a moment in the midst of what has been a kind of turbulent men's basketball season to recognize that the guy who is currently leading the program has been doing this at a really high level for a really long time. Jamie Dixon is only the 76th head coach in NCAA history to reach this mark of 500 wins. He had I believe it's 328 came at Pitt in his 13 seasons there. Now in 9 seasons at TCU, he has 172, which puts him second all-time in wins. He's 33 behind the all-time wins leader for men's basketball. I'm glad he got to that milestone. I'm glad that it came when it did. You know, there were questions coming into Big 12 play with the loss of Frankie Collins of how many games would TCU even win in Big 12 play, right? This incredibly young team, a team that he has really had to grind it out with. And, you know, Noah Reynolds had some really poignant stuff to say in the postgame as well. Melissa, I don't know if you had a chance to go watch the pressers, but I asked Noah what it meant to be a part of the team that helped Dixon get win number 500. And he, you know, he said it's awesome because Coach Dixon has never given up on us, is what Noah said. He said he comes in every day. He's incredibly positive. He wants the best for us. He's working as hard as anybody I've ever seen work. You know, he's inspiring, all this other stuff. And I think just that little glimpse into what has been a challenging season, I think, for fans to watch, was really nice to see in a heartfelt moment from Noah Reynolds, and then obviously an emotional day for Jamie Dixon. So congratulations to Jamie. Win number 500 is such an incredible accomplishment. I hope that he has many, many more wins in his coaching career. and I hope they come at TCU. Like
Yeah.
I like Jamie Dixon a ton. I think he's a special guy, and I think that despite the challenges that they faced this season, this is a young core, and I think there's some real potential moving forward.
I think it's perfectly acceptable as a fan, someone who covers the team, to both want the bar to continually be raised and still appreciate the fact that we can only have these conversations because of the work Jamie Dixon has done, right? And I think that's the nuance that's often lacking in these situations. We've said this on the podcast ad nauseum too, but we have been saying from the beginning, this was a rebuilding year. This was not an NCAA tournament year. This was going to be a team without a lot of Power Four experience. It was going to experience some ups and downs. That if they could sniff 500 in conference play, it would be one of the best coaching jobs of Jamie Dixon's career. Mm-hmm. And all of those things are coming true, and we're still really frustrated as a fan base. And again, that's okay. Like, that's acceptable to be frustrated because you've been to 3 straight tournaments and because you haven't eclipsed 500 in conference play, because you haven't advanced to the Sweet 16s. Sure. And we can all want those things while still acknowledging that Jamie Dixon hasn't stopped working. And this is so cliche, but there's not anybody that wants TCU basketball to be more successful than he does. Mm-hmm. And his players are bought in. And if he can keep the majority of this young core together, like, there's something good there. Vashon Alette is becoming one of the most
master of chaos.
Yeah, one of the most delightfully frustrating superstar players that TCU. Like, the superstar might be too big of a thing, but this dude's got some juice, right? Like, that's the thing, is he's entertaining and he's fun and he's frenetic. His teammates seem to genuinely love playing with him. Mm-hmm. I think he's going to be the hardest. I think him, Punch, and Micah Robinson are going to be guys that are going to be really tough to hold on to this offseason, and that's great because that means that they're guys that have developed.
Yep, it does. And sorry, keep going.
No, go ahead. I was just saying, like, I think that, like, getting to the NIT this year would be a great learning experience, and then the challenge becomes, can we stay competitive and keep the core of this group together? Because there's obviously Jace Posey has come a long way. There's just so much to be excited about the future, but it's also really hard to get excited about the future in the current state of college athletics.
Yeah, it's just a really transient time for college athletics, and there's obviously a right to be concerned. I think the thing that I really enjoy about Vashon Alette is you can tell, and maybe some of this is in the context of how he left Old Dominion and kind of the quote unquote red flags this offseason, whatever. He just, in my experience of being able to kind of be around the team and see him in practices and some other things, like, he is really trying hard to step into a leadership role. And I think that part of that is coming in the absence of Frankie Collins being on the court. But what an opportunity for development for a kid who's 19 years old, just a sophomore in college, still plays like his ass is on fire for every single minute that he's on the floor, for good and for bad. And, one of the things that I asked him in post-game after West Virginia, I mean, he led the game. He was game high scorer with 22 points. He had 14 points in the second half. He had 11 rebounds, 3 offensive rebounds, including one that kind of helped seal the win there at the very end. But one of the things that I heard him say to Jace Posey after the Baylor game was, hey, way to make the most of your minutes. And then we saw Jace Posey Wednesday night, 17 minutes, played down the stretch, was in there till the very end, and not just in there till the very end, was tasked with guarding Javon Small, who is the leading scorer in the Big 12 this year. And he scored some points. He got, I think, just 1 rebound. But those 17 minutes were like, hey, we need you to grind it out defensively. And he did that and was really impressive. And so I asked Vashon, I said, hey, you said this, you had this little moment with Jace after the Baylor game, and now he's out here, he's helping you guys close out games, and playing in clutch moments and critical moments. Just talk about his development. And Vashon gave like a 4-minute answer about how proud he was of Jace Posey and how hard he's been working and how the ceiling is really, really high. And just, that is something has happened with Vashon Alette this year where his innate leadership ability and his innate desire to be a leader has been allowed to flourish. And that is a really cool thing to see.
Gary used to say you got to grow them up, and I think that's something that Jamie Dixon has done this year. I mean, look at the freshmen and redshirt freshmen playing. Jace Posey, you mentioned. We've seen Micah Robinson in clutch situations down the stretch. David Punch has obviously become a guy that's getting really hard to take off the floor. These are guys that were all highly touted, but that have developed into guys that you can count on to play meaningful minutes at this level as freshmen and redshirt freshmen. And that, we have seen time and time again, Jamie Dixon does develop players. There have been some misses. There have been some super talented guys that have come in, but most people that show up to play basketball at TCU get better by the time they leave.
That's true. And, people like to point at PV at Georgetown this year, or Coles at wherever.
Fake TCU.
Yeah, Grand Canyon. Their numbers have ticked up a little bit this year. I think their usage in those new spots is a little bit different. But the reality is that those guys were desirable at those other programs because of what they had done at TCU. And we're seeing that with this next group of kids as well. I mean, David Punch had 19 points the other night.
That was so good.
Right?
3 for 3 from
Malik
behind the arc.
Diallo is playing this year.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is wild.
Yeah.
Considering the kid missed his entire senior year to an ACL injury. Anyways, TCU basketball, men's basketball, 12-10, 5-6 in Big 12 play. They've got a game on the road at Iowa State this Saturday, 11 a.m. Game day will be there.
Yeah.
It's going to be a raucous environment. That's going to be one hell of a test for men's basketball.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We just
we'll
waxed
see.
super poetic about this program and these young guys and Jamie Dixon, and by Sunday afternoon we might be angry again. But I think they'll show up ready to play, right? Like what that'll mean, I don't know. But Iowa State's been vulnerable here in a couple of games over the last couple of weeks.
Gotten blown out 3 times in a row all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And I was talking to someone who knows basketball much better than me, and they said, what that tells them about Iowa State is that they don't know what's going wrong right now. And so maybe they're gettable. Who knows?
They're gettable.
We'll see.
That pretty much locks up that we're all back on board Jamie trend if somehow they pull off that upset, right?
To the moon.
Yeah.
To the moon if they win that basketball game. But that's coming up 11 a.m. on Saturday morning for your viewing pleasure.
And then make sure you get out to Fort Worth Saturday afternoon to watch Texas Tech come to town to play. You're still number 9, TCU women's basketball Horned Frogs. Just a couple of home games remain for that program. So before the postseason, so it should be hopefully a really fun day of hoops.
Hopefully it will be. Yeah. Hopefully it will be. And in between, if you want to make your way out to Lupton, that's Saturday around lunchtime, you'll be able to watch TCU baseball get a little inter squad in.
Hey.
Because we are, Melissa, now at the time of recording this, 8 days away from opening day for TCU baseball.
So excited.
Can't
Start up, out to San Diego, and then out over at Globe Life Field. Mm-hmm. Right? Globe Life Field, yeah. Yes,
Globe Life. So 4 games in San Diego, playing San Diego, who earlier this week, Kirk Sarlos compared to DBU. He said they have 3 DBU-like teams on their non-conference schedule this year, one being DBU, one being San Diego, and then the other obviously being Southern Miss, who comes to town in about a month's time, I believe. But yeah, this is going to be a really fun baseball team this year. I don't know how we want to do if we want to fully dive into the preview. We've been recording for 48 minutes. Maybe we peel off, talk a little baseball, and then do a full preview next week at some point. How do you want to do this?
Yeah,
let's program live on air.
Yeah,
right now.
let's. I think we touched on some of the hit points and the things that we'll be watching for this weekend, and then we do our full preview. We lead off next episode with baseball.
Let's do this then. What are 3 things? Give me your 3 big questions about TCU baseball this year, and we can talk through those.
Oh, I like that.
And
That's a good way to do it.
And then we'll do the full team preview next episode.
Okay, I love this. I think my biggest thing is Ben Abelt has been such a staple at the back end. Mm-hmm. And while we still have questions about who's going to start, I'm very interested in who does TCU develop to be that lockdown, shutdown guy at the end of games. Because as you mentioned in your pitching preview over on Horned Frog Blitz, there are a couple of really strong options. There's plenty of guys that throw hard and have a nasty streak, but I think that is as mental as it is physical. And Abelt really grew into that role. And so losing him from the back end and bringing him in as a starter we go from seeing him 2, maybe 3 times a week to once? Who's going to fill the gap there? That'd be my first big question.
That's a good one. I think that's the one that the coaching staff is still trying to answer as well. But like you said, they've got some really good options. I think long term, the guy that I would most love to see fill that role and grow into that role would probably be Mason Bixby. Just an absolute electric arm. We saw him touch 100 on the radar gun last year as a true freshman. Was out this fall with an injury, has made his way back. I saw him pitch on, I believe it was Sunday afternoon last week. I saw him throw an inning. Fastball was sitting 93, 94. But the knock on him as a freshman was that he didn't really have anything other than the fastball. And he was mixing in a curveball, I think, pretty effectively on Sunday. So if he can develop a consistent second pitch and he can locate his fastball, I think that he has the sky is the limit for his ability as a closer, and then eventually if he develops a third pitch as a starter as well. Another guy who could probably fill that role, I would say Tommy Lepore is a good candidate.
I love him.
Depending on where he fits in, he's stretched out, right? He's going to have an opportunity to be a starter here over the next couple of weeks as they work out and get into the season. But he's another guy who's seen an uptick in his fastball. He's got really good command of some secondary stuff as well. Coming in just as a sophomore.
He looks like a dirty old baseball player. I love it, like in the best complimented way possible.
I don't know what Wichita State is doing, but he is cut from the exact same cloth as Peyton Tolley. Just like in personality, in kindness, and in intensity on the mound, all of the things are Peyton Tolley, just right-handed. And so he's a guy I'm really excited to see this year, wearing the same number as Peyton Tolley. He's number 49.
He's the dude that if he ever wore a batting helmet, which he won't, it would be so covered in pine tar that you couldn't see the logo.
True.
Like, that's the best way I can describe him. I just immediately was obsessed with him. Like, I looked over at you like, who's that guy? And he's going to definitely be a fan favorite this year for sure.
Yes, I like him a lot. He's a good kid. And depending on his role, he could either find himself as a starter or in high leverage situations in the back of the bullpen. And another wild card in this situation, I think, just to kind of round out, a 3 here, is Braden Sloan, who a guy who
go Cali
has a good fastball, a fun arm angle from the left side, a really good slider when it's working. He struck out 13 against Arizona last year. But doesn't maybe have the fully developed third or fourth pitches that you want in a starter who's going to consistently give you 6 or 7 innings. But I think he's got enough stuff in small doses to be pretty impactful in the back of a bullpen. So even if he doesn't end up being the closer, I could see Sloan slotting in as like a 7th inning guy, 8th inning guy in that kind of setup area to give opponents a different look before you maybe roll a 100-mile-an-hour throwing righty out there or something like that.
Listen, those of us that grew up in the mean streets of Roseville, California, we're built different.
Tough town.
Built different, and I don't care what you read about the way that Placer County looks or is situated or it is hard on those streets in Placer County, and so we're cut from a different cloth, and we're different, and he's going to be nails. I guarantee it.
Are you different though?
I'm built different, so different. Okay, second question. I'm obviously going to be rooting so exceptionally hard for Braden Sloan because, yes, we are from the same hometown if people haven't figured that out yet. And that never happens. That never happens at TCU. It's so exciting.
Well, it's just hard to get out of Roseville.
It really apparently. Is. It really is. Second question. We have seen talented freshmen come to TCU and contribute right out the gate. We have never seen the level of talented freshmen or the amount of talented freshmen that TCU has this fall or spring, whatever, summer. I don't know what season we're in. What can we realistically expect from this group, especially if as many of them as we're expecting to play significant innings are tasked with doing just that?
It's a good question, and I'm going to lead this off with one of my favorite quotes of all time from the great Ron Washington. You never know what the booty hole is going to do. And the realness of the situation that we're currently in with this freshman class is that a lot of them have had excellent fall camps. A lot of them have come back from Christmas and picked up right where they left off or have gotten even better. And so many of them were highly ranked. A good number of them were MLB draft risks this past summer. The expectations probably could not be higher for a freshman class. As long as I've been covering the team, this is arguably on paper the most talented freshman class top to bottom that I've ever seen come through TCU. And none of that matters if you get out there on day 1 or day 2 or day 3 of the actual season and wet the bed. So I think when it comes to what success can look like for this freshman class this year, I would love to see something along the lines of how Chase Brunson looked in the first half of last year as a true freshman. I would love to see them respond to the moment like Anthony Silva and Carson Bowen did when they were freshmen, right? Which is, hey, we're going to make mistakes. We're freshmen. I think Silva had 13 errors his freshman year, right? But you saw, like you could see the vision with Anthony Silva as a true freshman defensively with the diving plays over the middle or going into the hole at shortstop. You saw the talent with the bat at the plate.
He made the hard plays and brain farted on the easy ones. And that's
sometimes
right? That was the freshman thing, is you saw the talent and the ability, but the focus and concentration sometimes would look like a freshman.
And he looks like a junior this year, which is probably the best compliment that I can give him. And so for this freshman class, I mean, you've got Noah Franco, who's a two-way player who's going to play both ways. You've got Trevor Baumler, who's a two-way player who's going to play both ways. Sawyer Strohsnyder might step on in right field and just never give it up until he moves to center because Chase Brunson is playing Major League Baseball, right? You've got a bunch of freshman arms. Mason Brassfield is one. Zach James is one. Andrew Carter has looked good. Obviously, Baumler and Franco have looked good on the mound as well. Just the top to bottom talent in this freshman class. I just want to see them handle the moment well early in the season, and I think that will give us a really good idea of what they're going to do in the back half of the season. Because when you play young guys early, Kirk Sarlos likes to say this a lot, at some point they're not freshmen anymore, even though they're still qualified as freshmen and they're playing in their first season. Once you get 20, 25 games under your belt, once you get into Big 12 play, you're not really a freshman anymore. You've been there, done that, and now it's time to break through the freshman wall or take a step forward in a certain area or just make sure that you're consistent throughout the rest of the year. And I think that will kind of be the definition of success for this freshman class. I think we're starting at a much higher floor for this class than we have with the past few freshman classes. But that's just because of overall talent of the group. I mean, I think D1 had them as the number 8 most impactful freshman class or highest graded freshman class. They were top 10 recruiting class on perfect game and by every metric basically. And so I just want to see them handle the moment well, and their talent will become obvious to everyone once they step on the field.
Okay, I've been vacillating on my third question, but I think I've kind of figured out what I want to do. What is TCU's biggest offensive strength going to be? And the options I'm going to give you is hit for power, speed on the bases with Moback, hit for contact, or patience at the plate.
Good. Ooh, okay. Which one's going to be? I have to pick one.
Yeah, just one.
All right.
You can't even go around and be like, well, I think they'll be really patient at the plate, but
okay. Well, I'm going to do a little bit of that. So to the first one, power. Lupton just doesn't allow that, right? And I think last year, some of what happened in the fall gave me some false confidence in the fact that roster was going to hit for more power than it did, which was hardly any at all. And it's just hard to consistently hit home runs in a field like Lupton. I will say that TCU signed a new contract this year. They are no longer with DeMarini. They are with Rawlings. And so they have new bats. They have new equipment. And from what I've been told, the bats have looked hot at TCU this year, and from what I've been told by a couple different folks, is that is not exclusive to TCU. That this batch of bats from Rawlings have some pop. They are hot bats, and so could TCU hit for more power than last year? Frankly, I hope so, because they didn't hit for power at all last year, and that would be a nice step forward. Are they going to be more patient at the plate? I don't think that's it either, because you can't be more patient at the plate than this team was a season ago with all the first pitch strikes that they took. That's not really Mosiello's MO either. He wants you to be selectively aggressive, he likes to call it. If you know you're going to get your pitch, give it your best effort to hit it. So I don't think it's going to be that one either. I wouldn't call this lineup a contact lineup, because they do have a lot of gap-to-gap power, and I think in Lupton that's really going to play well. I think we're going to see a lot of doubles this year. I think we've got the speed on this roster to see a good number of extra base hits that are inside, that stay inside the park. So I am going to go with speed on the bases. I'm going to go with stolen bases, I think, is the thing we're going to see as kind of the greatest improvement, or one of the biggest offensive strengths for TCU this year, just because Mosiello is so aggressive on the bases. He loves stealing. He loves taking the extra base. One of the things that he coaches these guys on, and he hammers home, is just base path awareness. And it's not even awareness like, okay, I'm getting my lead off, I'm looking at the pitcher, and I know when I'm going to steal and how I'm going to steal. It's, hey, did you just hit a little nubber down the third baseline with a runner on third? As you're running to first, do you know what's happening over your shoulder? Do you know where the baseball is? Can you take second base right now? Or, hey, I just hit one down the right field line. I know I'm getting second. Can I get third? I'm going to maybe, if I have, can I take the calculated risk to get to third base? And so there's aggressive base running beyond just stealing bases that I think Mosiello is really good at implementing. And so I think speed on the bases is going to be one of TCU's biggest offensive strengths this year. I think it will show up in more stolen bases, but I think you're also going to see that in how aggressive TCU is at taking the extra base when they have the opportunity, not necessarily in a stealing a base situation, if that makes sense.
We saw it when I was out there last weekend for the scrimmages. I noticed that Mosiello got after a couple of guys for not having that situational awareness and not hustling to second base when there was an opportunity. And we've seen, that's been a frustration at times, because they can be overly aggressive. Guys are going to get thrown out.
Comes with the territory.
That's part of it, right? But I think if you're looking at opportunities and kind of manufacture extra runs, especially with the young lineup, playing in the margins, like we were talking about with the TCU football coaching staff. If you can win in the margins, you can turn that into wins on the scoreboard as well. So it's exciting. I'm bummed that they're opening with 4 games away from home, but I'm happy for them that they get to go to San Diego. And then that field and that tournament at Globe Life for Shriners is excellent as always. It should be a ton of fun. That's a great venue to watch baseball. I'm excited to be out there for sure. And then we'll get to see them back at the Friendly Cup confines of Lupton soon thereafter.
Absolutely. And I think I flipped something in my head when I was talking about aggressiveness at the plate, but we'll leave that for another time. TCU was too aggressive on first pitches last year.
Yes.
I think we'll see more first pitch takes this year, but not as many as people might anticipate.
Yeah.
And all 4 games in San Diego, by the way, are on ESPN Plus, so they are televised. All of the Globe Life games are on Flow Sports, so you can get your subscription there, I guess, and just suffer through it.
Or just go if you're
Or
close.
just go to Globe Life, or pay me $50 and I'll just live stream it on Instagram from my phone.
Perfect.
Or we can just FaceTime and I'll turn the camera around to face the field,
Perfect.
whatever.
I think that's illegal, but it's fine. That's
You didn't hear me say it.
there.
I never said that. I didn't say
maybe
that.
that's why Rick Hart's getting
Hey,
fired.
listen, if Tommy Tuberville can get away with saying he recruited Patrick Mahomes when they never met, I can get away with saying what I just said on the podcast and then denying it for the rest of my life.
Hey, he coached him.
It's
he coached
true.
Patrick Mahomes up. So
He is the reason Patrick Mahomes is about to win his 3rd Super Bowl. Because
how many games did Tech win when Mahomes? Is it 13 and 19?
Maxed out at 7, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was 13 and 19 is his whole career. I don't know. I can't remember. I don't have that number etched into my brain for any reason.
I will say this in Mahomes' defense: he didn't play safety or linebacker or corner or anything.
Defensive line.
And neither did the players who were assigned to play those positions. So
that was the real problem.
A big issue for him. I think that's going to do it though for this episode of Frogs Insider, presented by the Flying T Club. We will be back next week with a full baseball preview, talking positions, talking lineups, rotation, all the stuff that you want to know to get ready for TCU baseball. We will have that early next week. Until then, make sure you follow us on socials. Follow Frogs Insider on Instagram. Get over to the YouTube page and hit subscribe. Leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and we will talk to you next time. For Melissa Treebwasser, I'm Jamie Plunkett. Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.